one of these.
Classic.
Do you want me to wear your hat during the presentation?
No, I think
To
that
keep
would
it
be-
warm?
Yeah.
We always ask.
So,
Do you want to go
all
ahead
right,
and
I see.
introduce them?
Sure.
You're going to give an introduction, by the way.
Oh, I get an introduction.
I'll do the introduction. Hey, everybody, welcome to the last of our Mobile App Challenge Colloquia series for the year. As you know, this is Mobile App Challenge is a joint venture between IT Services and our partners at the Morrissey Center for Entrepreneurship at UChicago Tech. And the final judging of the challenge is coming up.
Next Thursday, May 30th at 3 p.m. It's in the Harper Center on the first floor of 104A.
So please try and make it for that. And I'm pleased to be able to introduce Robert Morrissey, who's somebody we've been working with on a number of fronts for a number of years. And this is just a recent example of some of the exciting work we're doing together.
Yeah, so my name is, he said, is Robert Morrissey, and I'm a professor of Romance languages, French in particular. And I'm director of the ARTFL project. ARTFL project stands for American and French Research on the Treasury of the French Language. And so we have a lot of large natural language databases. We basically started out in French, but then branched out into Italian, German, Greek, Latin. We have various Asian languages that we have in databases, and we develop ways of querying, searching, and do various data mining experiments on this data. So I'll just run through a particular instance of this, that is the Encyclopédie. So the Encyclopédie, does everybody know, when I say the Encyclopédie of Diderot et d'Alembert, does this ring a bell with it? No. Okay, so the Encyclopédie of Diderot et d'Alembert was an 18th century production, so it was kind of an engin de guerre of the Enlightenment. The philosophes all joined together to produce this encyclopédie, which was to contain the sum of all knowledge, and at the same time invent new ways of reading, most notably by developing a system of classification of all knowledge that was pretty much inherited from Bacon, but that they transformed in some very important ways, and that developed new ways of reading, that is, with cross-references. So this was supposed to be, in some sense, authors with many different points of view, a kind of dialogue, a way of interacting with the text that was different. And so this is an extremely important work of the Enlightenment, and it had never been digitized. So it was basically pretty inaccessible. We had 3 copies of it, but that was a very exceptional situation. And around, I'd say, around 1995, we decided to actually take this work and digitize it. So we chose the first, I'm hoping that this is not all in French as well. So because it's possible that I say it wrong. So this, to translate, this is origin of the edition. So, and it was an inaccessible text. So this is pretty easy stuff to translate. And so this, we had to go out and choose an edition, and then at the time we wanted to have the data entered, and this was a very complicated thing simply because the actual, the lettering is very different in the 18th century, and so when it came back, we had just a large number of errors, so we basically decided to put it online. I'm just going to come down. Here we go. I'm into now something that is more English related. And so, to give you an idea of what we were looking at, the Encyclopédie, because it was a very complex structure, and one of the things we've tried to do over time is take texts that are more and more complicated and adapt our software, our search and retrieval software to it. And so, this was one of the most complex texts, and it allowed us to think about the nature of the digital in context of developing tools. So there's this kind of dialectic between actual understanding of text and tool development. So just to give you an idea of some numbers, so there's 17 in-folio volumes, like this, 11 volumes of plates, 18,000 pages of text, in-folio text, 75,000 articles, about 2,500 plates, 140 authors, 21,958,000 words, and about 250,000 different unique words. The idea is, so when this came back, it was a very defective text, and we had to make a choice right off as to whether to put this on the internet and make it accessible, or whether to wait and correct it. This has been a source of constant tension with the French, in the sense that the French have said, well, wait till it's perfect and then make it available. And we, the sloppy Americans that we were, said, no, we want to make this text available. And so what we did was we decided to correct it as we went along, and to be able to give people access to the images at the same time. So they could search on the text, much like we do on a lot of textual data now. They could search on the text, and then they could go and look at the page images to see what the errors were and make sure that, philologically speaking, they were correct. So this led us into this idea that this would be a digital edition. And it was one of the first, this was very early on for this kind of work, actually. So this would be an edition, and then we would continually move forward in the correction process. And this we've done over the years. So we chose the first edition, and basically since about 1999, when we actually had the data back, we've done over 550,000 corrections, which gives you an idea of how many mistakes there were. We developed tools to correct it automatically. Then we did metadata corrections. So metadata is article headwords, classes of knowledge, authorship, and we verified this against the various authorities. Basically, for example, when we looked at authors, we were able to identify many authors that were never identified, had never been identified at all. And this makes the encyclopedia almost at the level of publication level, commercial publication. So basically, there's a lot of Greek in the text, and we basically had to go through and correct the Greek, and that was one of the difficulties with this, was that we had to choose whether we wanted to use their Greek, which was itself full of mistakes, or take modern Greek and put it in. Now, our general editorial policy has been take what's in the text, never deform the text. But in this case, we decided that we would have to use modern Greek editions so that at least people could go in and search on this, and it would become useful in some way. And then they can go back and look at the page image and see what the deformations might have been. We basically, in terms of corrections, we implemented a kind of rudimentary crowdsourcing device that allows us to go through and if someone puts in, says, I found an error, then they send it in to us, and we receive it, and it looks like this, and we go ahead and just make corrections. We're also working on the quality of the plates. So one of the most and beautiful things about the Encyclopédie, and I'll come back to this in a moment, are the plates. And we've gone through and actually just finished, in collaboration with the library, a new scanning of the plates at a high definition. And this will give us a really a much better quality, especially because many people use these plates to publish in scholarly publishing. They ask us for them, and now we'll be able to supply them. And you can see that the quality is really quite exceptional. So one thing I would say is anybody that has a few minutes can go over to the special collections room. It's really worth sitting down and looking at these plates. They're absolutely spectacular. These are our archival materials. So here, how is the Encyclopédie ordered? So this is around the question of encyclopedic orders. So the first order, as you can imagine, is alphabetic. It's totally arbitrary. And basically online in our software, you can just go through and browse it, and you basically just read one article after another. The second order in the Encyclopédie are classes of knowledge. So these are taxonomical orders. So you'll have like marine, agriculture, different basically classes of knowledge. And for this, they went back to Bacon's system of knowledge and developed it. And so basically the idea is that every article should correspond to one of these categories. And you can see that memory, reason, and imagination are the three faculties, and then it goes on down. Note the importance of reason, which is now put in the center with the whole notion of enlightenment, of course. In general, metaphysics is taken out of the categories of the Encyclopédie. So one of the things we've tried to do is actually develop a set of navigational tools that allow people to move through this huge amount of material in a relatively easy way. And so if I just take the problem of the classes of knowledge, just if we take this and say, well, all right, this would allow you to, a classification system that is going to allow you to navigate through the Encyclopédie should be one where basically you're able to say, if I take the case of agriculture, well, you find all the articles grouped in agriculture. Well, in the fact, in this Encyclopédie, there are 2,900 different classes of knowledge, and 1,600 of these, 1,600 of these have only one article in them. So you can see that if you have a classification system that where what is it? It must be well over half only classify one article. It's just a completely absurd system. So this is one of the reasons why we tried to develop new ways of navigating this. So some of the things that we've done are basically going through and doing machine-generated classes. So this is supervised learning techniques that actually tries to reclassify these articles so that, for example, if someone is actually trying to find an article in jurisprudence that has been classified in some strange way, the computer tries to learn the categories and redefine them in a way that would be faithful to 18th century ontologies, but allows people, us to navigate through them, through the system more easily. So this is the kind of stuff that we've been doing, and we can talk about it if you'd like to. Then the third type of order is the system of renvoi. These are cross-references, and this is a dialogical type of classification. That is, you can go and consult another article. Everybody has used cross-references. And this was what Diderot believed was actually the most important part of the new encyclopedic order, as he called it. And yet, very quickly, he came to realize that even this was an extremely defective system. We've attempted to use these cross-references, set them up as cross-links, and we've tried to look at ways you could see that you could do what sometimes is called distant reading of the text. That is, you don't actually go in and look at the text, you just follow the cross-references and see where they lead, and very often they lead to articles that have extraordinary importance, and you can detect this just by staying on the surface and looking at the cross-references. So the last area that we really have done some work is developing tools that are similar to things you see on Amazon when you buy a book. You get a list of these are other books you might like, and so we've actually used vector space modeling to say, well, if you were interested in the article on Spinoza, then these other articles might, in fact, also be interesting. So these are all kinds of navigational tools to move through the Encyclopédie. Then we've also done a series, then one of the things people try to do are identify sources. So you find an article in the Encyclopédie and you say, well, this looks like, let's say, Montesquieu said it, or this looks like Rousseau said it, or whatever. And so we started running the Encyclopédie against other big databases. And for example, you can actually now, we're able to say, well, we know that Jaucourt, if we run these two databases together and we're looking for similar passages, you're able to actually detect what passages in Montesquieu Jaucourt, who's the author, was citing. So all of a sudden you begin to be able to trace sources over time, see what people are using, different kinds of text. We've developed our own search engine, which is called Philologic, and we're now working on another version of this. So you can see that we've been working with this text in all kinds of ways for about over 10 years. And it was in this context that we said, well, why don't we try to develop an app? So most of what we've been doing has been, in some sense, you know, it's kind of interesting. Whatever we do, you're not actually getting much of the pleasure of the text. And what we wanted to do with the iApp was to come back to the text and make it beautiful and readable and accessible to everyone. And so that's really what we did, and that's what I'd like to just show you now, because I think well, we're very happy with it, and it's been a very interesting relationship, in a good sense, in the best sense. So we developed this under a huge amount of pressure because this is the 300th anniversary of the birth of Diderot, and there was a big conference in Paris, and so basically we were releasing this at the conference, and so we started it. We've been thinking about it for some time, but we started it in January for a March 26th release, and it was the first time I think that IT ever had to have a worldwide release of its app. So that basically we had to move this through the entire Apple system and have so we want to go up to the first. Okay, so this is basically what we'll give you an idea of what we've been able to do with this and the kind of richness that this brings to this text. So if we just open this up, you get the page now. So I'm going to be turning this. So this is the
Robert, can I stop you for a second? By the way, if you have an iPad, this app is in iTunes now, so you can feel free to download it and follow along.
Right. That was one of the debates we had, is whether to make this free or so. iPhones, it won't work on an iPhone. It's just an app. It's because it's just you can see when you start rendering something like this on an iPhone, it doesn't come across well enough. But you can see that you can get. We've put up the beautiful frontispiece that you have, and you can really, for the first time, these are things that people could never really see. You can go in and explore it in all kinds of ways. There's very little power left in here. And here you can consult at any given moment at an article. You can go examine and try to trace the article back to this figurative system of knowledge. And you can also really look at who all the different writers of the Encyclopédie were, and each one of them signs with a code, as you can see right here. And so, for the first time, this becomes actually visible, because you have to think of how people use the Encyclopédie. So this is like 17 volumes. So if you want to go back and find out who the author is, you have to go back to the first volume And then if you get a cross-reference, then you have to go back, you have to go to the volume, open the cross-reference. So it becomes an extraordinarily difficult thing. And with an IA, it really becomes quite magical as you just navigating through this. Then we can do, so then you can go into the various volumes. So in this case, you can open this up. And you can have, there's a very famous, the preliminary discourse is a very famous opening statement of intent, purpose, and kind of laying out of Enlightenment principles. And so you can scroll down this, of course, and then you can just read through, go to article by article. And then if you want, at any given moment, you can open up and look at the text and then come back to your own, come back to the spot you were in. You can begin, you can also, what's kind of a nice thing here is you can also actually change the fonts at any moment. So you can move, I think we have Dido. So you can, if you want to have a more modern version of the Encyclopédie. So you can really play with it, and you can also, for those that are visually impaired, make it larger or smaller according to your needs. I should mention that the primary developer, Josh Day, is right here, so you can ask him any questions about it. Really, it was really quite an interesting experience. I think for both of us when we go. You can go through volume by volume, so let's just go to, it so happened that this was on Easter, so we actually went to, we went down to, volume 3, and so we went to volume 3, and so you can scroll down and you can pick any article and look at it volume by volume. And you can also enter, this is a weird thing. So what's happening here?
It's just a split keyboard where you can thumb it.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah.
Oh my God, there's so much. Okay. So we look for communion. Now you've got to remember, France is a particularly anti-clerical place. So this was, so then you'd look at communion, and so you see you have this distributed by articles and sub-articles, and you can scroll down, and here, for example, here's an example of a cross-reference. So you're able to just basically go out and then go down to the volume. I'm going to take and then you go to the volume with E, and you can bring this up and just scroll, then you look for D. And you can, in this way, you can actually, so you've got to imagine that if you're trying to do this physically, you're going down, taking another huge volume and pulling it out. And here you can really just skim through this in really very, very quick and interesting ways. When you actually look at the article, let me just go back to the article communion. I believe, to give you an idea of the kind of revolutionary nature of this, volume 3. If I'm right. Yeah, so if you look at communion, and I believe if you go to the end of the article on communion, it'll send you to Eucharistry, and if you look at Eucharistry, it will send you to anthropophagy, so actually eaters of men, is one of the kind of way of inserting a revolutionary message in the Encyclopédie. So then the other way we can navigate through this is by author. So in this case, you can take someone like Dolbach, who was an author that was very not at all known as, he didn't sign many of his articles, and now we've been able to identify them. But you can immediately see all the authors that Goldbach write. He's a kind of materialist. And so once again, if you're just trying to explore the pre-revolutionary nature of this, it becomes a very easy way of doing this. And then you can also look at by classes of knowledge. Now this is an example of, you can quickly get an idea of these 2,900 classes I talked about. And for example, just to take the first one, well, the first category is abuses of language, and there's one article in it. So you can see that the classification system is in itself relatively inefficient, but this is the first time you're able to actually go through this and look at this in different ways. Now, some of the things that are fun to do is just to take, like some things that I do, are to take the category Marie, and then you could just sort of walk down all the different vocabulary, strange vocabulary, and follow it through and study it. I often do this in the evening, just before I go to bed. And then the last thing I think I'd like to show you is just the quality of the plates. So if I bring back the volumes, and I go down now to volume, let's just take this volume here, L'Amouage. You can actually really, for the first time, you can actually, so you can actually look at these images in ways that you just couldn't do it before, you know, and you can move from one image, just if you want to stay on the level of images, you can move through one image after another. And let me see if I can find. And you can basically get an idea of all the various, this is the culture of wine, describing how you grow vines. So you can really just follow these different images through in many different ways. And for the first time actually look, for example, at the relationship of the description to the various figures in a way that is much easier. So this has a pretty good use rate. We know this has been downloaded in China, Africa, in France, of course. It's becoming more used. So, and we think that this is opening up new teaching possibilities. For example, at Johns Hopkins next year, there will be a course on the Encyclopédie, and basically, they all have to buy iPads in order to take the course. So this is kind of some of the stuff that we're doing, and we're developing now. Walt, who's sitting next to Josh, is actually developing an Android version of this. So I don't know if you have any questions, but that's a little bit of what we've done. It's interesting working because we know our data very well, and we have a really very strong group of developers that work. And so we were able to sort of interact with Josh, restructuring the data, and what it allowed us to do was to see this data in a whole new way. I mean, it completely changed our vision of what our site should look like online. We're going to go back and integrate a lot of the stuff that we have been developed here onto the site. The whole aesthetic dimension, but also detecting errors. It was just incredible, the numbers of errors that all of a sudden were there, that became visible to us because we just changed completely the medium that we were working in. So I'd like to thank you guys for this.
I have a general question, not so much about the app, but the machine work that you guys did
Right.
on the text.
Mm-hmm.
After the machine is done and provides its results, how much human reading work has to go back into that?
Well, I mean, that's one of the things that, so, let's take things like, of the 75,000 articles, 15,000 are not classified at all. So, for example, if you're interested in something on religion, you're never going to get those articles if you're looking in the category religion, because they don't have any classification at all. So what we tried to do is to train the computer, let's take the case of religion, then say, okay, here are all the articles that are classified as religion. You develop a model for that allows you best to recognize them. And then we do. So they actually, it uses. Then we use it against the whole encyclopedia and say, now go out and look at the articles and identify those that are with religion, and we allow it to keep for the first pass through, we allow it to keep the actual classification, so it does very well. Then when we say, okay, now we're going to mask the class, and you have to look through the encyclopedia and just figure out which articles are about religion. And then you say, okay, now that you've done that, go out and look at the articles that have no class and try to classify them. So then we don't do any. Basically, this becomes a machine class, and it's just a heuristic device that allows people to say, well, this is how we put them up side by side. This is the class that the Encyclopédie is given. This is what the machine thinks it is. So, for example, one particularly interesting one was there was an article classified as gardening. And so our machine classified it as fishing. And so we said, gee, this is pretty strange. And so we went back and, well, it was a whole article on how to grow worms to go fishing. So that, there are some things like that that really are very true. Then there are errors. And usually the errors are, for example, one classic example is esprit, which means mind or spirit. But esprit is also a chemical term in the 18th century. So in the famous article by Voltaire on philosophical esprit, it came back as classified as chemistry, because mostly the word is used in that domain. So this is something is controversial, and in fact, when I was in France, people that have devoted their entire life to the Encyclopédie consider this as an absolute sacrilege. So, yeah, that the idea that you would, the whole problem of, even identifying cross-references, where we identify maybe 95%. And so one of the people that was attacking us spent an hour just saying, well, here's a mistake, here's a mistake, here's a mistake. And well, they're not mistakes. They're just, from our point of view, in the sense that this is an ongoing process in teaching a computer how to deal with a text like this. So the kind of old philology, this was really it was a very interesting concept, because it was really kind of old philology, new technology, America, France, so it was a very, I would say, fairly violent encounter. The following day, we had to do a presentation in Diderot's hometown, which is a town in the east of France, Lens. And there, they had high school students that were studying for the baccalaureate, which is a big thing. These kids really had just caught on the whole thing. I mean, it was really kind of a generational thing. They just sat down and said, yeah, here's how I can use this, and came up with this fantastic thing in front of a big crowd. So it was really quite nice. And then we were able to give them an iPad, which was like a full volume of all the Encyclopédie, which they didn't obviously have. So it was really quite a nice event.
I'm sorry, just a question. Can I ask in French?
Oui.
Thank you, merci. Donc, au sujet des erreurs, comme vous dites, vous avez corrigé ces erreurs. En fait, on comprend dans votre version qu'il y avait des erreurs qui ont été corrigées, ou on lit le texte sans savoir que vous avez corrigé quelque chose?
No, I mean, so she's asking about what constitutes an error in the text.
Yeah, no, because you talked about the esprit.
Right.
Okay, yeah. So I was wondering if you explain that you correct or modify or change something.
Well, no, so this is so there are, the corrections I talked about earlier are actual mistakes in typing in these.
Mm-hmm.
Then there are,
Orthograph.
yeah. And so, but if there's a spelling error in the encyclopedia, that is the data, then we usually leave the spelling error as it is. But for the machine, this kind of machine learning, basically, what we're just saying is here are different ways of navigating through this text. And these are purely heuristic devices, so we don't make any changes to the text that are drawn from the machine learning experience. We don't correct the text in that way because then you just end up, we just say, this is what they said, this is what the machine says. And so this allows you to see a lot of articles, for example, in chemistry, that were classified as metallurgy, forging, all these. This is a particularly interesting area. So that things that, for example, if you were to go into the Encyclopédie, say, what is in there about chemistry? Well, using the machine learning, you can probably get more than if you just look at the actual articles that they classify as chemistry. That's the advantage of this.
Are there other texts out there in other language?
Yeah, so well, we have a whole bunch of Asian language dictionaries, and then we have. We're thinking of doing a set of dictionaries of the French Academy that we also have, and would probably be usable in this way. So, I mean, since you're from the office that you're from, which is
UChicago Tech.
yeah, so this is the question of how to take these kinds of things and have patents or use them in financial reasons sometimes. That was a big decision we had to make. Do we charge for this or not? And so the idea is, well, you can charge $1 if we get it downloaded, then, And so the advantage of that is it allows us to hire a student, pay a student. On the other hand, a high school kid that could have access to this, so it was unanimous for these guys. They all said, no, we don't want you to charge. And so I was more hesitant, but they were right.
Robert, originally the text was, when it was originally digitized, it was typed in?
Yeah, it's double typed. It still remains better than any kind of scanning that you can do. But at the time, just things like the long S made it very difficult to actually, I mean, there were just huge numbers of errors. Now you can get 18th century text scanned, typed in, and it would be relatively accurate. But then I don't think anybody had ever attempted anything else. Any other questions? Not what up.
And what would you do if there's the next edition of this app?
Well, so this was, I think one thing you'd like to be able to do is probably you want to be able to search, for example, if I go into this volume, I can then begin to type in what I want, whatever. But what you'd like to be able to do is right from the get-go, right from here, to be able to search across all the volumes instead of having to pull out and go down to another volume. If you could just type in above, if there were a box like this up above, like a box like this right off, you could just say, I'm interested in seeing boats, and you could type it in and it'd take you right into the volume that you have to go to. That would be one thing you would want to do. Then there are a couple of other things that we'd like to add, but it's not like there's a huge amount of development to be where we want to be. This worked partly because we know this data so well. This came up, it was like beautifully born. And so we'll have a few things that we're correcting, but I don't think too much after that. On the other hand, we'll continually go through and and correct data errors. You know, there are more just spelling errors that you see, mistyped things that you pick up. And that we continue doing on both editions. But this is the kind of living edition that just keeps, it's a process that never stops. And this is the first time that it's become just beautifully readable.
For the renvoi, can't we just click on the renvoi?
Well, you can on the site. So this is the kind of example. Yes, you can. Can I bring up the actual site? You can just click on the renvoi and move from one to the other. The problem is it's very hard to identify. So the classic way we use is lexically, like see, you know, if you're in boat and you say, and it has a link to a cross-reference to rudder, you put it usually in the French, it's voyez, see, rudder. But in fact, it's much less systematic than that. So on the site, we do identify it, and these become hyperlinks that you click through. We decided not to do this because because it's relatively easy. But on the other hand, actually identifying. So, for example, let's take, you know, if you're in the boat article, it says yes. Then there'll be a part on sails. There'll be another part on masts, etc., etc. And then the cross references see above articles. And so you don't really know which one or how to connect it in. So it's better to let the reader actually do this. Thank you.